Okay, good afternoon, everyone, again. So this week we have Dr. Hacer Keles as our speaker. Dr. Keles received her bachelor, master's, and PhD degrees from our department. Then her PhD thesis actually received the Thesis of Year award from our university. From 2000 to 2007, she worked as a researcher and senior researcher at TÜBİTAK. During those years, she primarily worked on different pattern recognition problems using multimedia data, including audio and video. And she has been working as a faculty member in the Department of Computer Engineering at Ankara University since 2013. And I think she has an announcement to make regarding that as well. She is the principal investigator of a national-funded project related to Turkish Sign Language problem, and she's going to organize a workshop at CVPR 2021 regarding this. But her research interests cover a wider range in the areas of computer vision and machine learning, including action recognition, sign gesture recognition, generative adversarial networks, image embedding, and image segmentation. And we are looking forward to hearing her work on generative side of her work. Thank you for joining in, and the screen is yours.
Thank you, Sinan. Yes, I can say that I have started working at Hacettepe University starting yesterday, since yesterday. So it's very recent news, so I want to share it here as well. Okay, hi everyone, good afternoon. In this seminar, I will be talking about our latest research on image attribute editing using our Cyclic Reverse Generator. And my talk will be around 30 minutes or 35, we'll see. Okay, generative networks, in particular GANs, lately provide photorealistic images in high resolutions. The basic GAN structure that you see on the right side is composed of a generator and a discriminator, where generator maps a parametric distribution, which is usually implemented as an isotropic Gaussian distribution, represented here with Z, to images that have a particular data distribution. Discriminator network challenges the generator to produce images from the same data distribution in a minimax optimization setting. After the training, I hope that most of you know about GANs. I don't have time to go into details of this process. But after the training, we get a generator which maps any sample point from Z to an image. What we get after this mapping is a surprise to us, since generator learns this mapping in a black box manner, to us, of course, and we do not have much control over it. Yet we want to have a control on this production process, and we want to be able to make semantic changes on the produced images. What we mean by the semantic editing is changing only the selected attributes while preserving the others. For example, in the face image domain, we want to be able to change attributes such as hair color, beard, skin color, etc. As a result, we want to preserve the identity of the image while editing particular attributes of those images. In this context, I will start my talk briefly summarizing different related approaches from the literature from two different directions. Since we have limited time, the overview will be very, very brief, but still I hope that I can provide you some insights related to the alternative approaches in the field. Then I will talk more about our latest approach. And at the end, following our results, I will also show some samples from the recent related works from the literature as well. Okay, let's begin. As I said, generator G maps the latent code, which is represented as Z here, which is a d-dimensional vector, to a higher dimensional image space. In order to constrain this mapping, an important part of the researchers in the field focuses on Z factorization. Here it means disentangling the dimensions in Z space, as you can see below, so that each dimension in the Z vector, Zi, let's say, convey information about at most one factor of variation. I hereby need to say that there is little agreement on many aspects of disentangled representations in the literature, yet there's quite an effort to show working examples to achieve that factorization to some extent, at least for some subset of attributes, let's say. The disentanglement idea is based on the premise that a set of underlying factors are responsible for generating observed instances of the data. Okay, we should remember this. There are supervised and unsupervised approaches to do that in the literature. In the supervised factorization, labels representing certain aspects of the images, or we can also, I will also call them sometimes factors of variations, are defined as conditions in the GAN training. As you can see on the left figure, it is represented with red boxes with C. And each aspect is explicitly in a hard-coded manner in the conditional architecture as with C, as I said, represented as part of Z vector. The model then learns and associates particular factors of variations with the associated access that we provide here. In the unsupervised GAN setting based approach, the seminal work of InfoGAN will be an example here, and the architecture is shown on the top right. The mutual information between the latent codes and the generated data is maximized in a conditional training setting again. The model can successfully disentangle some factors of variations, especially for small data sets like MNIST, prefaces, etc. And there are many more recent follow-up works that use the mutual information maximization principle that is proposed in InfoGAN, and I will show you an example in a minute. On the other side, in the variational autoencoder side, it's basically an autoencoder setting. Here, the latent vector is learned with an encoder. In the seminal work of beta variational autoencoders, that is depicted on the bottom, the learned latent space is factorized by forcing the network to learn an isotropic Gaussian distribution. This is achieved by using KL divergence term in the vanilla variational autoencoder formula as a regularizer for learning factorized representation. We force the network to make the mapping, the distribution isotropic Gaussian. So constraint is higher here. There's also another direction of research where semantic directions are identified in the generator latent space, and without imposing any restrictions on the Z representation, our work is on this side, and I'll be talking about that more in this talk. Let's show some examples on the Z factorization part. Here you can see a beta variational autoencoder on the left and a more recent work, guided variational autoencoder from CPR 2020 on the right. In an unsupervised setting, particular factors of variations in the data distributions are successfully associated with the Z-axis here, that is shown as blue here, such as skin color, age, gender, etc. Still, variational autoencoder-based approach alone are not yet have sharp appearances, and the generated images have low image quality, as you can see from the samples. I mean, the most recent work is still generating samples with blurry images. Moreover, they cannot yet capture all factors of variations in complex data sets in such as CELEB-A dataset, although they are quite successful in small data sets. On the other hand, the GAN side, InfoGAN successfully factorized Z dimensions for simple data sets again, yet not that successful in face images, as can be seen from the samples. When the data distributions get more complicated and dimensions get higher, the factorization problem becomes more challenging. A more recent approach, FineGAN here, is just one example. There are similar works, which uses the same mutual information maximization principle during training of GANs, InfoGAN, sorry. Successfully disentangled background, object shape, and object appearance in a hierarchical framework, as can be seen on the top figure. They generated realistic and diverse images belonging to fine-grained classes of birds, dogs, and cars in their work. And this direction produces promising results in some domains lately. The second branch of research, which our research also belongs to, is working on latent space exploration rather than focusing on Z factorization. Here, instead of trying to force disentanglement in the Z dimensions, the researchers focus on identification of linear directions within the generator space. The estimated direction aims to represent an axis of a particular factor of variation within the latent space. However, there is no particular constraints on the relations on these axes in these approaches, like such as orthogonality or orthonormality, etc. In this part, I will first introduce our CRIG framework and then show some results from the two recent works that I selected from the same domain. We conducted this research with one of my PhD students, Yahya Doğan, who recently got his PhD degree. Our work titled Semi-Supervised Image Attribute Editing Using Generative Adversarial Networks, for the ones who doesn't know. And it is recently published in Neurocomputing Journal. Okay, our source of motivation was the impressive observation provided in the seminal work of Redford et al. They showed that the latent space of the GAN generator codes semantic information in such a way that it allows us to perform linear vector operations and get semantically meaningful results. As depicted with this image, an average Z is computed from that of the randomly sampled men images with glasses. Similarly, average Zs are computed for men without glasses and women without glasses. The Z representations of these images are used in the vector algebra as shown below, and as a result, they observed women images with glasses when the obtained Zs are used to generate images. Utilizing the same logic, using the linearized vector algebra, as I mean, we wondered if we can control the way we manipulate images by keeping all the factors of variation in the Z representations, yet change only the ones related to the selected attributes. So instead of using random sampling, we use the same idea here. We will need to map images from real world to the generator latent space and work there to edit the image and turn back to the image domain with the semantically modified image. Okay, this is the purpose. And for this purpose, we would need an encoder for efficient embedding, since we want to use reference images to compute the disentangled directions. And reference image should reflect the aimed factors of variation in the image. For example, in the shown reference image pairs, we have a neutral face and a smiling face of Yahya embedded in the Z space using our encoder, as seen here, represented here as Zn for neutral and Zs for the smiling attribute. We use these points to compute the directions, attribute editing directions. So the idea is quite simple, right? Yet, we were not sure at the beginning of the research if we can find this entangled direction from any random pair of images. For example, this is one of the questions in our minds. We also wondered what happens if we use different reference images. We also had difficult time inverting the generator function with an encoder. All the literature was closing this option by saying that it is hard, if not impossible. Related to this, we were not quite sure about the reconstruction quality of the real images as well, using an encoder, which could possibly affect our plans very badly. Let's see what happened. We started first training a slightly modified progressive GAN model that generates face images in 128 by 128 resolution. At the time of the development, by the way, this was a good resolution. Most of the works that we look at was in 32 by 32 resolutions that make this such analysis, encoder trainings. And we designed an encoder model to invert it. The technical details of these models can be found in our paper. We don't have sufficient time to discuss those. As a result of our efforts for training high fidelity GAN generator, we could generate good quality images and obtain smooth and continuous learned space, as shown with the interpolations between randomly sampled images in our generator latent space. So after training the generator, we designed CRG architecture for training our encoder. We trained our encoder in an unsupervised way, so no labels here. CRG design would enable us to show our encoder both real and generated images during training. Actually, this part was missing in the literature while training an encoder at that time. There are some structures that can be considered similar to these, but we have 2 cycles here, which is novel. Here, fixing the pre-trained generator for each iteration, we updated the encoder parameters only and evaluated the first cycle and second cycle in this order. So in the first cycle, we start with a real image, and in the second cycle, we start with random Z sampling. Remember, Zs are sampled from isotropic Gaussian distributions. So in the first loop, X is embedded in the latent space using our encoder, which is represented as the embedded vector is represented as Z prime here. And then Z prime is used to generate reconstruct. We say reconstruction here. We reconstruct the image X, and it is represented as X prime. And we minimize the L1 distance between the real image and reconstructed images as shown in the below the figure. In the second loop, we start with a randomly sampled set and generate an image, X prime. Then we embed that image to the latent space, and using our encoder, we obtain Z prime, and then we minimize L2 distance between Z, sampled Z, and reconstructed Z. Here you can see reconstructions of real images using our CRG architecture. On the top row, you see real images that our generator have never seen before. The second row shows the reconstructions when we fixed the generator during CRG training. And in the last row, you see the reconstructions when we also updated the generator parameters. In this case, you can see that the results, the quality of the images degrades significantly. So we also expected this, and we used in fixing generator during CRG training. Although we could not exactly reconstruct the real images, as you can see from the reconstructions in the middle row, we observed that characteristic attributes of the given images are captured by the encoder and reflected to the reconstructions. In this training, by the way, we used 30,000 images during training, and data distribution does not include some variations in the that we observe in real data, such as, for example, large earrings on the top right image of the real image shown on the top right corner. If there is no significant variation in the latent space for the attributes in real life, such as those earrings, for example, GAN generators are not capable of generating those attributes. Hence, a more sufficient generator could produce better reconstructions and get closer to the given image, given input image. At the time of publishing this paper, these were the state-of-the-art methods results that work on image reconstructions, similar to us. And our reconstructions was not bad compared to them at all. Still, we were curious if we can use CRG for attribute editing though. These are also reconstructions of the generated images. As can be seen, an image from the latent space is reconstructed in much higher accuracy. Using the simple vector algebra, we observed that our real image embedding actually encode factors of variations in the image accurate enough to represent many attributes. Using the compute direction, as shown here for smile attribute, we perform the editing as follows. Here we randomly sample as that. I mean, after computing the direction, generate an image. Then here, the depicted images are generated images. We iterate the computed set in the normalized attribute direction that we computed using the smiling face Z representation and neutral face Z representation, and computing the vector direction as shown on the top right. And then using another parameter K to interpolate the image in the latent space in that direction. When we sample a smiling image, as you can see, we can go in the backward direction. In the second row, you can see when we randomly sample a already smiling image, we can go in the reverse direction on the same linear direction, of course, and convert this effect back, so it becomes a non-smiling face. In our early experiments, we used photographs that we took from our lab members, and Özge is also one of my PhD students. So here the reference images are constructed using her photos that we use with our mobile phones. So using different image pairs, we could observe that CRG captures the relevant factors of variations as well. Here we see smile and pose variations on the left. And smile and pose together on the right. As can be seen, the identity of the images are preserved during the interpolations in the computed latent directions, such as eyes, hair, beard, skin color are preserved. Only the aimed attribute changes as we aim for. These are the things with real image reconstructions. Essentially, after embedding and reconstruction, it is no different from generated image editing. After that, we first wanted to see what happens when we use different reference images for computing the attribute directions. Different images, not from our labs, not carefully taken photographs, but using some external images. As can be seen from the 4 attributes here, top left shows the rectangle on the top left shows smile attribute, top right hair color, bottom left eyeglasses, and bottom right beard attributes. Beard attributes, not beard. Sorry, for a range of different looking reference images. On the left side there are different reference images, and we computed the directions as we explained, and then encode or edit the given image on the right left column, on the right hand side left column, to edit that image in that direction. Consider, for example, the smile attribute. We have 3 different reference image pairs with different genders, age, and skin colors. Yet in each one, we could successfully edit the same attribute to the image on the right. It is similar for the other attributes as well, although there are slight differences in the pixel level. Semantic editing is completed as planned. We also statistically analyze the distributions of images on the computed directions using different reference image pairs. Here you see the results for the hair color attribute. We want to see the data distribution in the latent space on the computed attribute directions using 5 different reference image pairs, and see the statistical distribution of the data. For that purpose, we projected the embedded set vectors using 2000 randomly selected images from CEREB dataset, which we did not use during GAN training. And each selected image, 20K images, have their attribute labels, black hair and blonde hair. So we projected them to these directions and display the samples with blonde hair as blue and black hair as green here. As you can see, in all, randomly selected 5 reference image pairs, the compute directions, the projections are all Gaussians. We see 2 Gaussian modalities, and they are they appear as in a linearly separable way in each one of them. We perform the same analysis, this time using the average attribute directions that we obtained from 50 randomly generated reference image pairs for 4 different attributes. Here, for smile on the top left, hair color on the top right, eyeglasses on the bottom left, and beard attributes on the bottom right, and observe similar attributes, although they change slightly. I mean, the mean shifts towards the neutral direction slightly, for example, for the beard one. And we wanted to see what's happening at the tail of the those Gaussian distributions in the overlapped regions. Remember, we have the labels of the projected images. Here, all the samples in the blue distributions are labeled in the SLAB A dataset as carrying that the related attributes, such as it is smiling, it has eyeglasses, it has beard, it has blonde hair, etc. So here, for each attribute, in this image, the middle row displays the images from the mean, around the mean of the blue distribution that we randomly picked around the mean and display here. As you can see, for example, in the smile attributes, they are smiling. And the top row shows the images on the right tail of the Gaussian distributions. You can also see the Gaussian distributions on the sides of those images. And in the bottom row displays the images from the left tail of the blue Gaussian distribution. The left tail is overlapping with the green distribution, as you can see from the charts, where we expect to find neutral images more, right? So in order to analyze the overlapping regions, we sampled images from the left tails of the blue Gaussians, and sampled images are depicted on the, as I said, on the bottom row. And as you can see, for instance, look at the sampled images from the bottom row of the eyeglasses attribute, or smiley. Let's look at eyeglasses attribute. As you can see, the samples do not have eyeglasses indeed, and they are labeled as they are carrying eyeglasses. So we just highlighted dataset bias here. The patterns are similar for the smile and blonde hair and beard attributes as well. Okay, let's pause our method here and see what is happening, what are similar approaches in this direction in the literature. There are also some recent approaches that analyze the latent space of GANs and try to identify disentangled directions as ourselves. Interface GAN is one of them. It's from CUPR 2020, very recent work. They trained linear support vector machines on 5 different attributes for smile, age, gender, and eyeglass attributes, then computed the separating planes using SVM models. And the normals to these planes are considered as the semantic attribute directions for the selected attributes. Makes sense, right? Their method is a supervised method, yet they are aimed to interpret the content of the latent space. That this was the purpose in their work. So, however, this approach, as you can see, cannot totally disentangle correlated attributes. For example, in the data set, gender, age, and eyeglasses attributes are highly correlated. They also mentioned it in their paper. Therefore, the compute directions are entangled. For example, you can see from the given examples, when changing the age attribute of a woman here on the top, on the left, the gender also changes while you age her. To disentangle gender and age directions, they define additional vector operations. It's also similar for eyeglasses attribute. In the data set, eyeglasses are observed mostly with old men. Hence, they need to explicitly disentangle these directions with additional vector algebra. They show that after those algebraic operations, they can disentangle it. Another work from the literature is from the same direction. Voynov and Babenko has designed an end-to-end trainable framework to compute attribute directions in an unsupervised way. The idea is quite interesting and simple, therefore elegant, I think. They create a randomly transformed version of a randomly sampled set. Here, as you can see on the top chart, this is the architecture. And they generate 2 images corresponding to randomly sampled set and the modified transformed version. Here, they just pick for the transformations, they use a matrix A and try to learn that matrix during training. I mean, it is trained, it is learned. The images are then sent to a reconstructor. The generated images are sent to a reconstructor unit, which is represented as R here, and it estimates the direction of the transformation. I mean, the index of A matrix here, and the shift amount, epsilon, that is also added in this formula to generate transformed image. So the network needs to figure out meaningful and consistent directions, transformations, sorry, so that, I mean, it is also a direction to minimize the cost of its predictions. Otherwise, it's hard to predict those attributes, those parameters. They share two learned attribute directions with this framework in their papers, again from CELEB-A dataset. They also show it from the different datasets, but since our work is related to CELEB-A face datasets, I just picked those here. Here it shows hair and skin attribute editing results. Directions are captured as shown. Yeah, skin color changes, the other one, hair changes, becomes more hairy, let's say. However, we also observe from these samples that the directions are and they're entangled. I mean, the computed directions are entangled. For instance, when you look at the skin color change, while the skin color is changing, the gender is also started to change in that direction. So this shows an entanglement in the direction. The identity therefore is not preserved when you look at the results in hair. Also, you can see the facial features also change slightly when you iterate in that direction. Still, it shows a good and promising research direction. I think it's a great work, I think. Okay, let's conclude. What are the challenges in our CRG framework? Is it perfect? Does it solve all the problems? No. The training data distribution of the generator limits the success of embedding. I mean, there are dead zones in the generator at some parts. When you sample that, you can see some dead zones which cannot construct good images. For some of the samples, we may sample from an unlikely part of the Z distribution, far ends of the Gaussian tails, for example. Then, due to the insufficient statistics, the reconstructions can fail. Which may indirectly affect attribute direction computations, of course, I mean, because we depend on it. So this problem, however, can diminish with training GANs using sufficient data variance. So as all statistical courses say, as n goes to infinity, it will be perfect. Yes, I also say that. For some of the attributes, it's hard to prepare reference images. Maybe this is one of the disadvantages of our methods. Like, for example, let's create a pair of images for representing attractive faces or ugly faces. It's hard, right? How to do that? It's very subjective. And it's keeping the other features intact is difficult for some cases, right? But for a pair of reference that you can represent using the same person, or I mean, when you have a pair of reference images, when you compute that direction once, you can use it for all the editings after that time. So it is advantageous on the other side. And also the last thing is encoder training, which is indeed a challenge. And in some domains, it's very much more challenging. We also have experience there. Maybe we can discuss it later, at some point later. And okay, it is actually over, but let me show you some more additional examples, what kind of directions we can compute. We computed and showed in our paper, and it is in the supplementary file that we provided. If you are interested, you can go and check in detail in high resolution. There are 15 attributes that we showed there. Here, for example, banks attribute. Here and without banks and with banks. And you know, here on the right hand side, you see a woman face, and we just artificially draw a beard on her face to make to imply the direction in the gender change. So as you can see, these images on the left, the top left, they are woman images, and when you iterate in that direction, you see that like her brother here on the right, you can see, right? And female to male also looks similar. I mean, you generate female face, which is similar to the male face, but of course, similar to subjective interpretation. For age attribute, you can see some results we can maybe later discuss in the questions part. And beard attribute, baldness, as you can see, skin colors are preserved, the other characteristics are preserved, only the person become bolder in that direction. And some other attributes, changing hair color, skin color, etc. here is also depicted. Okay, this is the end of my presentation. And if you have any questions, I will try to answer them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Hacer Hocam. That was really a nice presentation. This is my second time, but still,
sorry.
For me. Any questions from the audience? No. Okay. Maybe I can go over my comments.
I'm sorry. I will reopen it. Sorry.
Have you tried analyzing the directions, the angles between the directions?
Yes, we did. Actually, it changes up to, I mean, we look at the cosine similarity and computed angle from there, and it changes up to 30 degrees. I mean, the variation was very high. Maybe I thought that the variance, and there is redundancy in the data set. I mean, very much redundancy when you look at the resolution and the particular attributes that the GAN sees. So actually, many of the axes in a range of degrees there are entangled. That's why, I mean, in that range, when you pick any direction, you see that it changes the, it was surprising to me. I was just expecting very small differences in the angles, but it was large. But it requires more extensive analysis. I mean, we just have looked at for the 4 attributes for randomly selected the 50 reference images, right? 50 is not a maybe good number to get a general evaluation, but we had an idea. I mean, it is the redundancy is high in the latent space.
Okay.
Actually, one of the reviewers were asking that, I mean, when you use 2 different reference images, they should generate very, I mean, not very, but numerically different Z values, right? How the differences, the normalized directions that you computed from embedded Z directions can be the same direction. But we said that they are not the same, but they all encode the same attribute. I mean, it's a family of directions, let's say. They can encode the same attribute in the latent space, at least our latent space, because we just use 30,000 images. Most of the works use 200,000 images, but we just kept some separated some of them for analysis. And also we don't have enough resources to have all of them. It took time.
Okay. So from the slides, I understood that even if you use different reference images, the directions are the same.
Directions are not exactly the same, actually. I mean, okay. I was actually in my answer, you know, when you said, did you compute the differences between direction? I talk about the same attribute. I mean, smiling attribute. I get reference images from your face, from Yahya's face, for example, and get this direction and computed the difference, the angular difference between them. And they are not exactly the same.
Okay, then I'm confused. So in one slide, you use different reference images, then you applied the direction on the same source image, and you obtain some similar results.
Yes. Here, for example, as you can see, we use Yahya's face. We could embed, we could edit the images for smile attribute. We use Özge's smile, Özge's photographs, and we can do that. And when we analyze the vectors that we computed, Z vectors, they are not exactly the same. I mean, numerically it is almost, I mean, it is expected, but the difference is not very small.
Okay.
As well. I mean, it was surprising to us.
Okay. And then my question regarding the orientation between the directions is regarding different attributes. The directions are different. So whether they are orthogonal?
Yeah, actually, we try to observe them using, high dimensional, from high dimensional space to we projected them in 2-dimensional space. They are projecting using nonlinear projections, so we couldn't actually interpret it. It looks orthogonal there, but I don't think so. I mean, we didn't make vector-based analysis. We just used visualization techniques. What was TSNR?
Yeah.
TSNR, right? They look separate when you project it, and they were consistent for different data. But it also requires some we need to make more analysis there. They are not orthogonal, but we checked that one, but we don't know what is the relation between them.
Okay, thank you. I have more questions, but let's go. Let me give space for this. Any questions from the audience? There is a question in the chat. Did you try?
I don't.
The features?
Can you read it? I couldn't. I cannot.
The question is, did you try changing multiple features?
Yes. I mean, here on this image, you know, Özge on the right, Özge is turning left, so it is pose variation, right? Pose is changing. At the same time, she's smiling. So we here depict two variations. And as you can see from the images, non-smiling and looking at this direction guy on the second row is, I mean, maybe it is inverse direction. When we go over, it turns to the other direction with a smiling face. For the woman example on the top also, keeping the other attributes, the pose and smile variation can be captured. You can also do it with hair color as well. I mean, you can change the hair color and smile it. We tried such stuff, but I don't have examples for this because we couldn't put everything on the paper. So I got this from the paper. Yeah, it works actually. I mean, here, let me maybe summarize it again. The essential thing is to be able to consistently embed, consistently get Z vectors for neutral images and images with some attributes. In that case, the other factors of variations can be canceled when you compute the direction.
Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, I have a question regarding adjusting the K value. So let's say I start from the neutral face.
Yeah.
My target is, let's say, smiling face. I start implementing K, and at the end I end up with the smiling face. What happens if I go in the other direction?
Yeah, what happens? Actually, I have slides for that. Let me show you. Sorry, I will restart it, but they were hidden. I just thought that if there is such a question, I can show you now. Okay, it's time to show.
Does it start distorting the page?
Sorry, I couldn't do that. I need to show this. Okay, now I think it will work. Sorry. I think I understood, Sinan, your question. And here we made extensive analysis on the K. So what is the limits of K? What is the effective range of K, right? Because when you go further and further, at some point the characteristics of the face will start to change, because there are many modalities there representing different people. If we talk about identities here, you see here starting from K0, when we go there, on the average, we have seen that if we sample Z from the mean distribution of a particular, a neutral face, let's say, if we are on the neutral face size, because if you randomly sample an image, it can be anything, right? So let's assume that this is the real image and we reconstructed them. So we know that it's not smiling, it's a neutral face. In this case, you can go very safely using up to K2. I mean, experimentally for the 4 attributes, we made this analysis, and the analyses that are shown here on Gaussian distributions, we take mean and standard deviations of those distributions. If you sample an image from the mean of that distribution, you know, the sigma here, I mean, 3 sigma corresponds to around 2. When we use K is 2, it was around 1.8 or something on the average for 4 attributes. So if you sample from the mean, you can go up to K2. But if you go further, the image starts changing gradually to some other person, some other characteristics change. So it is a locally preserved space, let's say. Those Gaussian distributions tells us so. And also when you go further and further, which means that you actually get out from your Gaussian distribution in the Z domain, right? In this case, the variation stops and you see a particular face, fixed face. As you can see on the right-hand side, there's a woman with black skin color, etc. And on the left edge, you see a very bright, very white woman with very blonde hair, etc. I mean, here, this is a range for skin color. So we can see that also hair color and skin is entangled in that direction if you go far further, as you can see. Hair color also changes. So it is locally defined. Okay, if you go very much further, of course, it will change. It's not guaranteed to be preserved because it is getting out of the distribution. Yeah,
this is really an interesting topology. We are interested in this as well.
Yeah, and also in the work that I presented from CVPR 2020, they also observed this, and they went further and further and see that, oh, it is a constant image, someone's face, and it is different from ours because of the distribution, the data selection and training procedures just fixed them differently, of course, but it is fixed when you go further away from the mean distribution.
Okay. If there are no questions, maybe we can stop recording, then go informally.
Okay.
Thank you, Hacı Hocam. Again,
Thank you for listening. And these were good, very good questions. Thank you.